The first thing is to understand the scope that we deal with here. So we're looking at about 127 different organizations spread across 27 different countries. So clearly, we're looking at different regulatory frameworks here. Having said that, I think one of the most important things to do is to understand at the core how we started out, which was with the GDPR. Up to a year later now, we've got, I think, increased maturity with our privacy and GDPR, which has been very helpful. The next stage, which would look at Privacy 2.0, is taking that worldwide. GDPR, I think, has given us a firm foundation. The next stage now is to customize that to local jurisdictions, and that's where we are. I think once again, when we look at the GDPR, we have found that after that, we've had this rapid proliferation of new regulation across different jurisdictions. There is a challenge, I think, in trying to keep abreast of these changes. But I think in addition to that, there's another challenge where not only keeping abreast of what the changes are with the regulation, but also what the specific changes are regarding to what we're already doing, if you get what I'm saying. And if you take the CCPA as a case in point, while it is a new regulation, there are a number of similarities with the GDPR, but there are some nuances where they are treating things slightly differently. I think one of the challenges is keeping abreast of that ability to understand in detail what the specific changes are in different jurisdictions. Another challenge, I think, on the trying to manage compliance generally is, and going back to what I said earlier about scope, we look after, I think, about 68,000 different guests annually. And what the increase in privacy regulation is doing is it's helping the general public become increasingly aware of their rights. Now, what that means is we then get an increase in subject access requests, people trying to exert their rights across different things. This is a metric we track, and we are seeing an increase in that. So I think that would grow over time, and it will become increasingly a challenge to deal with. As part of the onboarding process, it's always critical to have that contractual basis. So we look at the contractual relationship between the parties. During that, it's always helpful to understand what the vendors are doing in terms of audits. Have they had any audits before? Are they willing to undergo audits? Are we looking at an audit as some sort of like control mechanism as we move forward in the relationship? Periodical audits, for instance, annually. I think another thing we do are DPIAs, where we try to do these data protection impact assessments to help us, number one, understand the risk, and then look for ways to mitigate that. Regarding vendors, these are the things. It's also important to note that, vendors vary. So you have some vendors who, are critical. You have some who are not so critical. Now, it's easier, I have found, to manage the not so critical vendors because the relationship is inversed. But when it's the other way around, then it is a challenge. When we speak to big data and this never-ending need to collate and amass huge data sets, I think we will see a challenge there. When we speak to AI and this ability to use artificial intelligence to manage these data sets, we will see a challenge there. When we look at the fusion of both, then I think we should be ready for some confusion. Other areas that I think are beginning to become an issue, we look at facial recognition, for instance. I think we had a ruling probably as recently as yesterday around that, where, is it okay to do it? Is it not? It's clearly personal data, and I do see facial recognition portending a challenge over time. The last area I'd speak to is really in the area of biometrics. So biometrics and what may happen if that's not managed properly. So we look at DNA, for instance, which is an area there. So those would be what I would say, we should look out in terms of privacy and in terms of the growth in that space, which if not managed properly, could become challenges.